With Anthony Elanga all but through the door at Newcastle United, we're going to be looking at what's next in the search to improve the squad and also analysing names of two potential new striker targets. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It really helps, as I keep saying. Today we're going to be looking past Anthony Elanga and what happens next at Newcastle after the big breakthrough that happened yesterday. He's arrived on Tyneside for his medical. He's had the first part of it. He'll probably complete the move today. By the time you're watching this, he may well be a Newcastle United player. But we're going to look past that and look at what's next. All the evidence points towards Newcastle aiming for a striker next and leaving the centre-backs and the James Trafford deal on the back burner for now. And the reason they're on the back burner, as there was a point in another video by Keith Downey yesterday, which I thought was really interesting, that Eddie Howe, Andy Howe and Steve Nixon can only really focus on one deal at a time. And maybe that lack of a sporting director is having an impact more in terms of the negotiations and the practicalities rather than the targeting of players. The message when Paul Mitchell left was that everything would run smoothly because the operations and the direction of travel was basically already made clear. But actually practically going in that direction when you're trying to buy a goalkeeper, a centre-back, a striker, and obviously having finally brokered this deal for Elanga, that quite concerning that Newcastle can only do one deal at a time because they are quite stretched in terms of the staff, and it's understandable, but it's a real issue for where they are in this position. Nobody's saying that. I don't think anyone's really saying that Paul Mitchell should have stayed, but the reality is that he's left and that this is what Newcastle have to deal with. Again, I have reservations about whether a striker should be next on the list as well, because for me and many others, I think right-hand side and centre-back, if you look at the first 11, fix the roof first before you go in to fix the furniture effectively. And the first team has two glaring issues in my mind, or had two glaring issues last season, which was, I know Jacob Murphy did really well last season, and as we mentioned, he got better numbers than Anthony Elanga, but is he going to continue on that vein? I don't think so. But they've improved on Elanga. They need to do the same with the centre-back, and Fabian Schär is getting older, Dan Burns getting older, there's a lack of pace at the back. We know that these issues are quite prevalent, and there have been names. They're moving on from Mark Gahey, but he still seems prominent on a number of lists. Giorgio Scalvini is very high on that list as well. Edmund Tapsoba is somebody who I've brought to the table again, and I think that if the opportunity arises, they'll look at that. But the point is, they're not looking towards the centre-back at the moment. They're looking more towards the striker, and a versatile striker as well. Do I think that that's the right choice for now? No, because I think, yes, they need a striker, absolutely, they need to fix that. But at least they have Alexander Isak to start the season. At least they have Anthony Gordon on the left. At least they have Anthony Elanga on the right. They have strong options to start that game at Aston Villa. Whereas I like Fabian Schär, but last season he looked like he was off the pace a little bit. He looked like his age was finally catching up with him a little bit. So the centre-back and improving that situation needs to be higher on the list. But by the sounds of it, they are looking towards a striker first, a versatile forward first, to give Alexander Isak a little bit more support next season without quite a stark drop-off to Willa Sula. That's nothing disrespectful towards Willa Sula. He's really promising. He's excellent. He's physical. He's powerful. He's got a good personality. He isn't really someone that Eddie Howe trusted enough to play more than a few minutes at the end of a few games last season. Why would he suddenly be able to step in and play Champions League games or league games from the start if Alexander Isak isn't there? They do have to have other plans, and also the fact that they have to make the money go as far as it can. They need to make them versatile, so they're not looking for out-and-out number 9s necessarily. They're looking for players who can play wide or play maybe number 10. So Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been mentioned as an option, but I think because of the profile of player, they'll look other options first. Players who can play as a 9, maybe predominantly do play as a 9, but can also play out wide or play in a deeper role as well. And two names that Craig Hope mentioned in his column yesterday that were quite surprising but very interesting as well were Ollie Watkins and Yoane Wissa. Now, I'm going to say from the very start that I think Ollie Watkins will be a non-starter because the player will not want to join Newcastle in the level of competition that he'll have with Isak. Watkins is currently the number one striker choice at Aston Villa. Now that Marcus Rashford's left, he was very unhappy last season at Villa. You could quite clearly see when Rashford was there. That may not be the case by the end of the summer, but right now he's still the first choice. Why would he leave to come and play second fiddle to Alexander Isak? Wouldn't have much opportunity on the left as well, which was his initial position as a kid growing up in Devon. His valuation's extremely high. He'd be an excellent addition, don't get me wrong. I think I mentioned this in the video about PSR at the back end of June. But the value on his head, the fact that Villa need him, there's no need for them to sell him. And also I couldn't understand any logical reason why he would want to make that move. So to be honest, I didn't really want to put him in the thumbnail, but because him and Wissa were mentioned together, it felt a little bit jarring not to mention him. But I just don't see him as a possible option, so I haven't done his stats, haven't thought about him as a possible option because it just doesn't make any sense. I do think Wissa is a very interesting option because Brentford have him and Brian Mbeumo on 1 year contracts left, 11 months left on their deals now. Last season, I probably do think they need to sell one of them. They're digging their heels in on Mbeumo at the moment. The thought process is that he will go to Manchester United, but they're digging their heels in, and Phil Giles, their technical director, said that they've been told that he would be happy to stay there for a year. So if that transpires, maybe Newcastle will test the resolve for Wissa. I will just stress that these are just names that have apparently been mentioned in meetings in the last couple of weeks. They're not long-term targets. There's not been much due diligence on a possible deal. There's no progress being made here by all accounts. It's just that these players have been mentioned. Wissa does make a lot of sense. He scored 19 goals with 4 assists last season. He can play across the front three. He's 28. He's experienced. I think Newcastle, by the way, can relax their rules about needing to be fit and available and needing to be 23 and under when they're coming to this player, because it's a backup player. It's a player who can add to the squad and create competition. It doesn't necessarily have to be a brilliant, an excellent first choice player, because those players are very difficult to sign. Yes, I've mentioned players like Moise Kean. Yes, I've mentioned Samu from Porto, but in the current climate, it just doesn't look like those deals are really feasible. Someone like Wissa, whose profile fits in terms of style, experience, goals. As I say, I've got his stats from FB Ref, and here they are. Non-penalty goals, 85th percentile, 88th percentile for expected non-penalty goals. Pass completion, 86th percentile, 83rd percentile for progressive carries as well, and blocks, 89th percentile. So again, really good, rounded, balanced stats. Good in terms of getting shots and goals, good in terms of passes, good in terms of dribbles, good in terms of blocks. Defensively, works really hard. Excellent player, and would be a very good deal to be done. Nottingham Forest had a £22 million bid rejected in January. They haven't returned. I think maybe test the water with around 30 million, see what happens. That could possibly be on the agenda. And this, by the way, again, just to go back to Brian Mbeumo as well for a second, explains why he was initially Newcastle's first choice target, because him coming in would have solved this issue, really, wouldn't it? We've seen him play as a 9 for Brentford. And he can play on the right-hand side. So it would have been 2 players in one. That was why Newcastle, I think, really went for him. Now, as good as Elanga is, they do need to then solve this issue as well on top of it. There's a difference between Wissa and Mbeumo playing centrally and, say, Gordon playing centrally. I think Gordon is someone who has done it and can do it as an option, and has done it throughout his youth career, but has never really done it predominantly as a player, whereas you've seen them in the Premier League start those 2 players, Wissa and Mbeumo, as 9s. So that's why I think there's a big difference between the pair of them. But generally, I think Newcastle will also look abroad for this option as well, and I'll cover a couple of other options in other videos. Wissa seems like a good deal that could be done. His value isn't extremely high. I think he would be enticed by the move because of the Champions League possibilities. And the difficult thing is with these players that there is a growing feeling that they will not be able to get a real superstar signing. They've obviously failed in getting Liam Delap and João Pedro, who've both gone to Chelsea. And part of the suggestion is that Alexander Isak's presence has caused a little bit of a problem in that sense. Being in the Champions League, Newcastle are going to play probably sort of 55, 60 games next season. There's going to be loads of possibilities for whoever comes in to play off the bench from the start in all the different cup games, in the league games. There's going to be so many opportunities. Newcastle want to be in a position where they don't have to run Isak into the ground and give him this groin problem that he consistently had last season. Again, 2 years ago as well, when Newcastle were last in the Champions League, he had the same issue because he wasn't able to rest it and get back to full fitness as soon as he needed to be. And that's what Newcastle need to avoid. So they're in this really strange position where they need to find somebody who's quality enough to come and challenge Isak, play instead of Isak at times, play with Isak possibly as well, but also is not necessarily going to be put out by not having the tag of being first choice player. And I think Wissa is a great example of that. Watkins really isn't. I just don't see any way that Watkins would join Newcastle from Villa. His first choice there. He's loved there. I think he enjoys it there. Obviously, he's had a great record and goal scoring record there. But the crucial thing about both these players is that maybe they're a little bit older and they are relaxing the rules on age and possibly even availability, which may even bring Calvert-Lewin into the equation as well. But they're not the only options. As I say, these three players have only been named. I think Newcastle will look abroad again. I think they should definitely look abroad again as well. And also I think that Newcastle should definitely be more mindful of what they do at centre-back, because that for me has to be the next priority over this, because I understand if what I said at the start is affecting things in terms of the number of people that they have to do these negotiations and their ability to only move on to one than over the next. But I think it's absolutely crucial that both of these positions are filled by September. But Newcastle need to be going into that Villa game with a new centre-back, I think, personally. Somebody who can come in and partner Sven Botman really strongly, bedded in the pre-season as well. In the same way that I mentioned when Botman came in 2022, because he came in early, it allowed Newcastle to play with a new system throughout pre-season, and they were ready to go in at the very start against Nottingham Forest. Newcastle need something similar in that regard, but if they're going for a striker, Wissa would be a good option. It's a really difficult market to go for, someone versatile, someone who's good enough. When shopping in the Champions League sort of level of market, it's almost more difficult. You've got to get every decision right. You've got to have them be ready, and also the lack of ability of guaranteeing first team football. As much as we might understand that those players will play a lot, from their perspective, it's a difficult sell, as we've mentioned so many times. So Newcastle do have a lot of work ahead in their striker search, but Yoane Wissa would certainly be a very, very good start if they were to go for him. Thanks very much for joining me on today's episode. I'll be back tomorrow. Like, share and subscribe if you want more of this, and I'll see you then. Cheers.